Well, welcome to today's webinar. We are in Hanover today, and we are looking at urban strategies and urban culture. And we have a great couple of people here in the webinar who will present their work. And I think we go directly to Hanover itself and Joy Luhmann, who is one of the organizers, who will tell a little bit more what's happening today and all the cool things over there. So welcome, Joy. Joy, do you hear us? It seems a little bit frozen, the picture right now, and that is sometime happening. So then I give the word to Aviva, and I'm pretty sure Joy will come back. They are out there in the field, so sometimes it's bad connection, but it worked pretty well just a few minutes back. So Aviva, tell about what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, I'm here in New York City right now. I just came down from Maine, which is north. I work with systems design for restoration work. Most recently, I've been working on a project called Blue Trees, where in addition to layering some of the scientific data about how ecosystems degrade and might be supported for resilience, I've involved a legal judicial system. The situation is that the United States has been crisscrossed with fracking and natural gas pipelines. So I designed an installation which is simultaneously synesthetically spatial and acoustic, that was installed where the pipelines intend to condemn land to take it over from private property owners and develop natural gas pipelines. And in this case, the particular pipeline is only 30 miles outside of New York City, and it's 100 feet, which is about 30 meters from a nuclear plant, which has had a lot of difficulties. So we did the installation, an overture for a symphony. We're about to do the first symphony in about 2 weeks. And we simultaneously did a Greek chorus in about 12 sites internationally, and we've copyrighted the overture. So now we're trying to find a lawyer who's willing to issue a cease and desist demand against the gas companies that they can't proceed with the gas lines because it would destroy the art. And there are a lot of financial and legal difficulties with this. But conceptually, what's interesting to me is that for my dissertation, and something I've been working on for a long time, I've researched the idea that you could identify small sites that were activated with ecological art whose impact, if they were restored, could affect a large bioregion. So this is an experiment with that idea. The small site is actually about 1/3 of a mile outside of New York City. Then there are several more sites nationally and internationally, and there is a musical element, and there's also a film. So if anybody wants to friend me on Facebook, you can scroll down and you'll see there's a 5-minute film. There was recently 2 articles about it, and now there's a second film that came out about other painters who are generating this project. The project itself is that there's a melody. It goes and that corresponds to a spatial map for where individual trees in the path of these natural gas corridors are painted with a sine wave, and the sine wave represents one note, and the note goes from the roots of the tree and the earth to the branches, and therefore it's integral to the habitat and cannot be destroyed without destroying the art. So that's it in a nutshell.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So hopefully it works there in with Joy again in Germany. So can you hear us now? You need to unmute the microphone.
We can hear you good for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully they are joining there. They seem to be coming there.
Okay, can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay, so let's start in short words. We have the Culture of Change Festival here in Hanover, and it's a process we are running since 3 years to combine the environmental activists and the cultural players of our town to join efforts and build experiential spaces for broader public. Today and tomorrow we have the third version of our Culture of Change Festival, and we have guests here from different cities of Germany and even from Copenhagen and Denmark. And I would like to give the word to Sasha Kagan, who is here from Lüneburg, and he brought the subject of our talk into the discussion. The strategies for cultural spaces of possibility. So, Sasha, maybe you can, in a few words, hopefully the connection stays.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Joy. So I can say a few words about what we discussed so far today, because during this first day we had several exchanges. We first of all exchanged about an initiative which exists for 3 years in the city of Köln, of Cologne, in the west of Germany, with Martin Herrndorf, who's not with us right now, but who has been presenting about this. We also discussed our experiences for people who visited the Tag des Guten Lebens. This is a special day once a year, which is a day for without cars in many parts of the city, but also a day for experimenting creative everyday life, and where one really can see that thousands of inhabitants are trying to create their everyday life in a different way. So that was the first case we looked at. Then we discussed around the Gängeviertel shortly. We have Michael Silk, who's just here. Maybe we can turn a bit our computer. Michael is just here from the Gängeviertel in Hamburg. And then we also learned about several initiatives, especially from Kultura 21 Nordic in Denmark, in Copenhagen, thanks to Stine, who joined us from Copenhagen. And then we ended up with a discussion with an officer from the municipality of Hanover, who has been very active for years in terms of having an Agenda 21, a strong Agenda 21 office in Hanover, and who is organizing many different activities, including also this Hanover Car-Free Sunday. And then we had some comparative discussion on what are the advantages or limits of one-day events for sustainability and culture, or longer-term approaches, and also comparing events in Köln and in
Okay, right now it seems that we have lost them in Hanover for a small time there. So maybe we go further to France, as if you can hear us there. Are you
Hello.
with us? And I think,
yes.
Yeah, great.
Yes,
yeah,
I'm here.
So maybe you could introduce yourself, and hopefully we can have the camera on. Yeah, great.
Yeah? Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm in Chicago area of the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes area of the United States. And I'm an artist that works with primarily these post-industrial cities. Of course, Detroit is very famous in this regard, but Cleveland, Chicago, Gary, Detroit, the so-called shrinking cities of the industrial Midwest. And the particular work that I do, when we first started this, someone said something about urban strategies. I use a knowledge-based strategy, and by that I mean that I evolved a platform that is really a question: what do artists know? And this rhetorical question became a method for embeddedness, for entering into civic processes, bringing the artist's knowledge, methods, strategies, thinking, arts thinking, into the civic arena to find possibilities, to find new modalities, and to join the collective effort. Or, as I like to say, to opt in, not opt out. So not merely to critique, not merely to look for alternatives outside the system, but actually to enter into the collective table. And the work that we do, I would say, is a hybrid nature. I'm very interested in the idea that something can be art and culture and also something else. And this is because I come out of a background in art and science. So I'm very interested that something could be art and city planning, or art and soil remediation. And so mostly, I've worked for some years in Chicago, where I principally live. And in the last 2 years, I've started a site in Gary, Indiana. Gary is quite famous as probably the most shrinking city in the United States. It's lost the most population of any place. It was built from scratch in 1909 by U.S. Steel as a steel town, as a company town, and it sits on the edge of Chicago. And it has a accelerated and extreme version of all post-industrial city problems: population loss, poverty, soil degradation, and yet it sits in one of the most resource-rich areas in the region, right on the lake, with incredible natural beauty around it, and high transportation infrastructure runs through here, very critical section, and yet it's a city in distress. And so this is my new project, to ask how can artists participate in rethinking the future of areas like Gary.
That's very interesting. Maybe we could go into it. I was just curious, how did you get into this field from this perspective? I know, from what I know from Chicago, is John McKnight and asset-based community development, Obama and all this. They have a rich tradition there of participatory work. So
yes, they do. And it's also a very entrepreneurial town. So actually, I entered the first embedded artist project that I did was with the City of Chicago Department of Planning and Department of Environment, and I entered this through the Department of Innovation. I did not enter through Department of Cultural Affairs, who have a more conventional take on public art. They think of it more as conventional kind of plop art. And so I entered, I got the position through the innovation office and started calling myself artist innovator in this case. Because if you talk about experimentalism or experiments, people in government don't like that because it makes it sound like you don't know what you're doing. And I was trying to claim expertise, claim that we had a solid expertise and a solid contribution to make, that we were professionals, artists. And we are not just disruptors in a kind of a adolescent way, but we are more interested in a more serious kind of change than that, a responsible change. And so I entered through the innovation office, and they were very glad to host this program. So I offer that as a strategy. If you find resistance among the conventional channels where you work, you might find a receptive partner in a very unlikely place. And this is one of the things that I've learned to do. If you don't find receptivity around the logical connections, look for them elsewhere and find receptive people, because they're there.
Brilliant. Oh, wow. That's a nice story. So maybe we can go to Jenny here, and she's in Australia.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me? Is that okay for sound?
It's okay.
Fantastic. Just as a general overview, I guess I became involved in this whole sector about 25 years ago through an interest in access and equity. I began doing a lot of participatory processes with different groups of people. I was really interested in that sort of transformative element at an individual and group level to start with, and we did a lot of sort of worked in all different mediums in looking at you know, building things like sculpture trails involving about 300 people and things like that. And that was working a lot with people with disabilities, Indigenous people, and generally groups experiencing disadvantage. Moving in, and that was sort of in parallel to paid work, which was in sort of welfare education, and that sort of morphed more into the cultural sector. My last two jobs, for 3 years I was the cultural officer for Western Sydney, which is 1.9 million people, where there's a lot of basic access and equity issues, but it was also looking at how to really build the cultural sector there, especially given it's a very culturally diverse region, and with the richness there, but also the barriers to participation as well. In the last couple of years, the last 2 years, I've been focusing on the mining sector, which and working sort of grounded with a regional community which has suffered the impacts of Peabody International's mine there for the last 7 or 8 years, and it's and I really wanted to work with an empowered, focused community campaign and look at how the art skills and projects that I could offer could actually support what they were doing, given they're the people with the knowledge and the expertise as to how to move forward with their campaign. So I've been spending a lot of time developing processes to help their group gain visibility. We had a huge performance a couple of months ago as part of a contemporary arts festival where we had over sort of 100 people there, and the community members participated. It was a sort of a mash-up of Fahrenheit 451 and the Irish potato genocide, because that's how we kind of, you know, I was adding sort of the crisis that the government's creating here in terms of capitalism against what's sort of happening at that local level, and the need for sort of all these counterculture responses. But that was just to help build visibility, and especially to the local, state and federal governments who funded the festival, as well as to help the community. There's also a media campaign element where I'm working with the Missourians Organising for Reform and Empowerment, because that's where Peabody is based in America, looking at getting material there so that people are using, you know, so that people can understand similar situations elsewhere and also benefit from it. I'm also I brokered some legal support so that we can kind of look at the legislative changes that are happening really quickly, given the mad rush grab to get as much coal out of the ground as they can, in terms of the diminishing of community rights around noise and dust. I'm also, I was just, I developed a sort of a neo-extractivist coal mining game with the main coordinator of the campaign, because the complexity of the way that the industry works, overlaid on all the planning processes, overlaid on all of the different games that are being played out at governmental levels, as well as all of the other things that are going on. We just wanted to tease open the whole range of things that are happening, so that we could then use that as an educative tool. So that I'm at that prototype stage where I've done it as a big public artwork, and just needing to move forward so that that can potentially help people who are also, you know, operating in the blockades and things like that, because unless people sort of get their heads right into what's going on with all these processes, it can be quite baffling to know how they can intervene effectively. And so in parallel to this, I've theorised this whole area within a doctorate that I finished in 2014. But and it looks at how to use all the different sorts of fields for strategic ways to lever support, whether it's through the legal field, the political field, or just using the art field more strategically, like Aviva's doing, based on that fabulous Canadian example of where the copywriting of the top layer of soil to sort of stop things from moving forward. So that's probably enough.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting. So from what field is this mainly where you have been working around in this mining, or how did you get into that space around this industry?
I guess I've always it's just whatever the prevailing concerns are, and you know, I mean, I'm working on the refugee issue as well, but I just saw this one as something when I you know, when I moved into the region, that was just one of the biggest concerns for the region, especially because you know, this part of Australia is being used. I don't know whether you know the term roadkill, but all of the regional communities are being used and destroyed, and our rich agricultural lands for the purposes of the just a quick cash grab for people in the city. So I guess it's just another access and equity issue that needs to be dealt with here. But it's just, I mean, it's voluntary work apart from arts funding, but it's sort of working from that unfortunate deficit model of how do we rectify the problems, rather than looking creatively towards all of the things, all of the possibilities that we could be doing at a more tactical level for things that move things forward in a more positive way.
Mm-hmm. How do you think that the people, the actors around, or your perception of how do they look upon what you're doing there? I mean,
in terms of the actual community people?
Yeah, in general, the different stakeholders there.
Okay. The local people, they're really appreciative. It's sort of a small community which hasn't been given much media attention or policy focus at a local government level, and so they're appreciative just that their stories are being recorded, and the potential that all of the different products may actually be helping gain traction at a wider level to actually make some changes possible. I mean, I did a lot of research on, you know, I went through about 5 boxes of material, so I'm more than happy to sort of act in that sort of secretarial coordinating role, and through that I put all the papers together from the history of the whole mine, and that's teased out a few potential in terms of government workers.
Not sure. maybe we lost her there. But Frances or Aviva, do you have something to add to what?
Yeah, because Francis talked about the difference between...
Pardon?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah?
I can hear you very well. You disappeared for some time there, Jenny, but maybe Aviva has some comments there.
Yeah, I'm afraid I missed some of what Jenny
Yeah.
said, except that I'm very interested in what she was saying about mining, because my own work started with restoring a post-mining site. The project that I'm doing now is interested in two main issues. One is that the judicial system internationally seems to be losing sight of what the public good is. It's been co-opted by corporations that don't have the environment in mind. The symphony that I'm doing is not just about an artwork. It's about restoring a more resilient relationship to nature by engaging in a conversation that has to happen internationally. The problem with initiating these kinds of conversations, because they really have to go to about environmental ethics, is that you have to exhaust the state options before you get to the United Nations. And in the United States, we now have a very corrupt legal system that's been co-opted by many Tea Partyists. And although I started as an artist that works equally in science, technology, and art across disciplines, I came to the conclusion that simply redesigning the physical systems was not going to be enough, that we really had to simultaneously work on redesigning the conceptual systems, which I guess is what you're involved with, Bert-Ola, and the others, of course, here, and find the integration between recreating our relationship to nature that's resilient and establishing the kinds of dialogues that will lead to changed behavior going forward, because I think we really are in a crisis. I think we really have perhaps a year, maybe two, but probably just a year to move forward in some dramatically new ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I concur.
Oh, this is Frances. Oh, go ahead.
Which is why sorry. Oh, just to respond to that, yes, I completely agree. I mean, my targets, I guess, now are around governance policy and embedded programs, because that's what I see as being sustainable in terms of implementing change, and within those processes, as you say, it's about those relationships. But I mean, we really need to be building active citizenship processes, because we just don't really have, we can't rely on democratic processes occurring here anymore.
Yes, you know, sometimes we get caught in arguing about bottom-up and top-down processes, when in fact all processes need to be engaged. And this idea of embeddedness, getting into the room where decisions are being made and bringing the critical mechanism, the questioning and the consciousness clarity that artists are excellent at, bringing that into that conversation before the decisions are made is very useful, because if we are not at the table when the decisions are made, we are left to a reactive position instead of a proactive position. We can't offer alternatives as readily if the train has already left the station. And so this is why we can see that participation can happen by, you know, doing it bottom-up processes, but we can also participate by entering into the seat of power and performing that citizen artist function and showing what, of course, in other fields they call leadership, but maybe we are here calling a cultural or intellectual leadership, into and helping bring that critical clarity and our questions into the seat of power. I think artists should not shy away from this, and they should not relegate their actions exclusively to the reactive streets, but also know that democracy happens in City Hall, and that belongs to them, and they can enter that.
Right. I think we are back to Hanover again here, and I can see they are in another location, so maybe you can hear us now.
Yeah, we can hear you. We have a breakdance show from New York, right, in this cultural center. But if you can hear us, we are fine so far.
Yeah. So we could hear you pretty good last time there, and Sasha was in the ending of his what you said there. So maybe we could continue with Denmark and what you are doing, Stina, or Kultura 21, I think.
Yeah, that's a very fast jump into what I'm doing. But I was telling about the project we were just doing in Gdansk, and before that I was talking just briefly about a project that we did last year in Copenhagen. And one of the questions I got was if some of because they were all participatory in different ways, one in exploring and drawing from explorations of areas, and one in making building by recycled materials, and by that discovering a connection to the water in Gdansk. And one asked the question how these discoverers were then finding ways, if they were being seen by, say, governments or whatever, decision. And they are not so much at the moment, but I was wondering who was also getting the power from doing these things. If we didn't really go into talking about so much about empowerment, but that was I think one of my initial curiosities about that was how you facilitate action, and we were also in these projects talking always, I don't know, that we have a word we can't translate from Danish, that is nensomhed, and care is not the right, because care comes from, what is the root of care? But that is a more negative, and nensomhed is just kind of paying attention to something.
It's like respect, maybe.
Yeah, kind of like respect, but
caring, respect, caring for each other,
nurturing, or the way it was a way of inhabiting a space that I'm curious about, because of the world we live in. With that, I think it's so interesting how we can be better at inhabiting together. Yeah. That's one of the questions. But should I tell a little more about the projects that we were doing?
Absolutely.
What?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes,
so we know.
Okay. So I'm used to showing images when I talk about the project. So one project we did last year in Copenhagen in relation to Copenhagen being green capital. So Copenhagen was then showing all these good examples of how it's good at being green and a livable city and things like that. And we wanted to make a project that would also bring ways of making new ideas. So that was kind of our initial focus. So throughout the year we were inviting for a series of workshops that would have the intention of being kind of this innovation process was the idea that when we started. But it was in many ways an experiment. What we did was invite for making drawings of visions of an area of Copenhagen. So we were drawing. These were all kinds of they were locals, and they were also professionals interested in working in this field, drawing their imaginations of. The project is called Eco Ama or Eco Island. So they were drawing their visions of the space as an eco island, and they drew this kind of very sensitive and imaginary maps. That was one part. That was one part of it, and the other was going for walks and just rediscovering. And afterwards, I realized that probably the very kind of special thing about this was that we were rediscovering the areas that many of us already lived in. But then, when we live in a city like Copenhagen, many of us doesn't actually come from that city. So it was for me definitely, and I hope for some of the others, a way of reconnecting to where I already live. So in some ways, a very, very simple thing that had a very not visible output, but in some ways very subtle. That was kind of actually the qualities I saw in that. The other project was very different in its ambition. So we kind of scaled our ambition down on the impact, and we wanted to go from this very definitely intangible to work more physically with the materials and with the work physically with the fabric. So we were in Gdansk building. The invitation was from a local culture center to work with vulnerability in Gdansk and the city in relation to the water. So we were for a week building with mainly with local kids, but also with then later a workshop came with elderly. We were building platforms that could float in the harbor. This was by doing it, testing a lot of various issues, like how could you actually be allowed to get into the water. And we had of course wished to be testing on water while we were building, but that was never the option. That was never an option. So we were building on land, making one platform that should carry itself. Now I have a loud background. That should carry itself from empty water bottles, and another type of platform that was carried by 2 empty gas volumes. But all this kind of had this little physical tasks along the way, like the gas bottles had holes, but it was just a very interesting way of engaging with the material that would always ask questions while we were working with it.
I think I'm also working with floating platforms, and I think these eco islands are a really great symbol to attract people, and it's a good sandbox for new approaches to society, because you have a very small space where you have to work in circular processes, which is good in the relationships between people working on this, as well as the material flows. If you think of a toilet, you need to have a compost toilet, and what do you do with the soil? So you have circular processes, which is very helpful to reshape, redesign your normal life as well. There is, for example, in the US, the Living Universe Foundation. They want to colonize the stars and everything, the universe. But the first step of colonizing the universe is to have a floating environment where they can test these circular processes. We don't need to colonize the universe, it's far off, but to learn how to manage our resources and also our local processes, then it's a very good symbol and playground to have a floating island. So this is very interesting that you came also to this subject, to this format, to work as a city planning or shaping tool.
I also found that it became a question-asking tool, that it wanted to afterwards discover new things, like how can you actually clean the water, where does the pollution actually come from, making some problems more accessible, or not accessible maybe actually yet. That needs more testing for that.
Do you think that art in general can have this function to ask questions.
Definitely, yeah.
So
I always discover.
Why is it? Is it because art is free and you are allowed to ask?
Because that often, or the way I see it is that as human beings we think in many different ways, and we think through materials and through movements, through singing, through touching.
Mm-hmm.
But we have made a tradition where we are thinking through talking, writing, like this. So when we engage with the material also as thinking, then we learn something. And many practices, I guess, do that, but maybe art has a very more open-ended way of doing that than if you're an engineer. But engineers and architects also do know that materials think. They just maybe don't say exactly that. But,
okay.
So I think that's, for me, it's a rediscovery of thinking through making.
We have some questions here, I think, as well. So maybe, I think Francis have a question here.
Well, I just had a comment. You know, I keep bringing up different ways, different kind of subversions. And when Joy was just talking about that we don't need to colonize space, I met a man who investigates industrial textiles. And he has a grant from NASA to try to figure out how on the space station they can have silkworms on the space station where when the silk clothing of the astronauts wear out, they can convert the protein of the garment into food for the silkworms to grow new silk to make a new garment, all in a closed loop on the space station. And what he said about this was that he knows that what the work he is doing, that we are, the space station we are all really talking about is Spaceship Earth. And that, you know, Buckminster Fuller's idea of Spaceship Earth. Because if we can do it on a space station, we can do it here. And that even though he's pretending that his research is for the space station, what he's really doing is researching for planet Earth. And I think that every discipline, all of the mechanisms, you know, this is actually how I met Satya, talking about how you manipulate the conventions and the expectations within the structures that exist in order to ask a new kind of question or do a new kind of work. So I see this scientist being very much like an artist, where he's manipulating the cultural condition of his discipline in order to do some innovative or work that questions the status quo. So anyway, Spaceship Earth maybe is the spaceship.
I have a question too for others.
Yeah.
I was really interested that people were talking about physicalizing the experience, and I think this is one of the reasons that artists can contribute something different. It's because we're used to thinking tactilely. We're used to thinking in terms of the tacit knowledge that comes with physically, literally working with the world. And I wonder what other people would like to add to that idea in terms of their personal experience. I know that with the Blue Trees project, there's something about identifying the tree that you're going to work with, creating this mark on the tree. It requires you to almost hug the tree in order to generate the symbol. And I wonder how other people have experienced the physicalization of a different relationship to the world and possible resilience.
I think Jenna is there to say. Hi, Jenna. It's a bit bad connection right now. Maybe the sound will come here. We can wait a little bit and see if the sound clears up.
Then you have to unmute.
Oh, is that better? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I had the mute on. Idiot me. Yeah, I just think coming back to permaculture design principles, I just think if they're taught more universally within schools and people pick them up more, because you know, producing no waste is what Joy was getting at with the silkworm example for the astronauts, and I just think all of those ideas being integrated actually get us away from that sort of physical experience of having to leave our ego behind as part of artworks, that I think is a huge problem.
Mm.
Do we have some more comment from Germany down there?
Yeah, I wanted to add greetings from the Battle of the Year from New York, which is happening here in Hanover. I don't know why. I want to add just a short statement about Open Island, which we are working on since several years, and we have developed an open source manual for floating islands worldwide out of globalized trash, plastic bottles, pallets, and transportation. And our strategy is we mostly work without money, as we find it very interesting to attract people that don't go for the money but for the content. So in early project stages, we prefer to work without money to get the good people aboard. And later on, as we are now on the stage, we have teams that work for the goal, not for the money. And now we can apply for grants and implement our ideas and projects into real world scenarios. And we have now identified a location where we can establish a floating island out of trash in Germany, and we are planning to make it a maker festival for floating islands. It is on flooded coal mines, brown coal, so they are the climate killers, #1. And these mines are in Eastern Germany, former Eastern Germany. They are flooded now, really naturalized. And there are several festivals from the music scene with tens of thousands of people. And this is...
Bloody
This is the scene of young people that want to have experiences, and they are willing to pay for it even. And they are open-minded, and they are open for new mindsets as well. So we are focusing now with Open Island in Germany on this music event scene to create some momentum for positive products, projects, and people. As we cannot compete with the regular economics. It's impossible, and it's they have the wrong systems. So we need to establish a system, a part of these regular systems, and we must be faster than them, which is not that difficult, as we work with creativity and not with money. We work with trust and not with law. And so we can be very much faster than them if we still focus on our assets, which are not money but creativity, trust, love, and passion. So these are our assets, and it's we need some spaces where we can also to become systems and trustful societies or groups. It's difficult, of course, but if it would be easy, anyone else could do it anyway. Mm-hmm. So we are researching on this subject.
I have a question there to Stina from Denmark there in Copenhagen, since Copenhagen has a quite good reputation as a city around green economy and this very ambitious aims of being carbon neutral 2025, I think. If it's not the first town in the world, but one of the first, at least, to be carbon neutral, at least emission. How do they look at, how do you perceive the Copenhagen city or other institutions are looking into art and culture as a facilitator, or how do you feel they look upon your work there? What support do you get and so forth?
They don't really look at my work, actually. I think my work is still kind of under the radar. But they do look at cultural entrepreneurs, definitely, and also not so much on artists, but a little on artists. And the artists they look at is often the very what I have seen where they use artists in. I was showing a project that is sometimes often shown also about a park that is developed where the famous artist Superflix is doing this kind of what did I call it? City involvement. City involvement extreme, and now they will open the door again.
Yeah.
Sharing was also inviting Ole Eliasson, or I don't really remember exactly where the invitation came from, to do this ice sculpture on the Rådhus, on the main square, the City Hall square, where as a way of symbolizing the melting ice poles, he was placing 12 ice blocks on the City Hall square where everyone could experience the ice melting. And afterwards, the ice was brought to schools where the students would then do all kind of testing on the ice blocks there. So that was just a few experiments, but I mainly know of these very. No, there are of course the big ones, and then there are the smaller ones where small entrepreneurial consultancy, also often from architecture, for example, does workshops where you do building. So in participatory projects towards the publics, so the urban space, you will do these temporary spaces. That has been used a lot, but it's not so much. It's towards the social in parts and cultural parts of sustainability, but they are not looking very much at the moment at the environmental parts for using artists in act during this. I don't see Copenhagen actually doing that.
And maybe somewhere, at least if you look at resilience, I guess you need all parts in a way to make it happen. But do you have something to add into the dialogue so far?
Are you talking? Who are you talking to?
All.
Well, I have, I keep hearing people mention this business of artists' capacity to create an experiential approach, an embodied approach, a kinesthetic material embodiment. And I think that this is very important. I mean, I haven't really said very much about my actual projects, but this is one of the key things that I think that I bring. And I work a lot with plant material, whether that be climate monitoring plant material or soil remediation. And of course, like Michael Pollan pointed out, when you enter with the plant's view of the world, you enter different time frames, you enter different soil strata, plants collaborate with microbes and sunshine, and they don't really care that much about people, although they like our CO2. And they have a very different approach. And when you start partnering with living systems as one of your primary collaborators, and you can help bring the conceptual apparatus of art and culture and work with living systems and help create an experience that the public can get a glimpse of the interdependency of these two systems, I think this is a real contribution that we can make. And it's certainly one of the factors that contributes to the overall lack of understanding of our present condition, and it also is one of the factors that is diminished in the crisis of representation in which we live through mediation. And so I think that artists who can stay in touch with the physical phenomenological manifestation of cultural ideas, future ideas, environmental limits, that putting these things together in a way that the public can understand them better in an embodied way is a real solid contribution that we can make. I also just wanted to say that I really liked and wrote down Joy's little list that he was making about working with creativity, not money, trust, not law, and I kept on going. You know, he said love, and then I thought not power, passion, not legislation, and I wondered if this kind of idea of beginning to really articulating the kind of assets and capitals that artists working in environment actually use and bring might not be really a great way to share strategies with other artists.
Yeah, it would be great to formulate our currency, right?
Yes, exactly. I think you made a great start on it.
A few years back, in fact, for the COP15, or I think it was in Copenhagen, 2009, we created something we named the World Bank of Trust. And we have a magazine around it also with science around. You can find it there if you look. But just the other day I was thinking again that you could make some kind of dynamic map where you put all relations between how you build trust and the combination of trust to motivation and expectation and creativity, and then how it works together there. So it's just like a small input into it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know,
sorry?
Well, I just want to add, one time this really worked for me. I needed a soil scientist on my team, and I didn't have any money. And I found this soil scientist, a very famous man, who wanted to work with us. And then later, after I got to know him better, I asked, why did he do it? And he said that because we had no money, and he said he wanted his life's work to be used. And so what I began to realize was that there was a kind of respect that I had shown his work, that I wanted it even if I couldn't pay for it. And he responded to that because he knew that it was his ideas that we wanted and not just buying his services. And I think that lots of people can respond to this idea of contributing through their intellectual and creative efforts, and not just artists.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I've got the same experience. We call them makers. I think there are makers all over the world, and if you give a maker a challenge, he will solve it. It's not a question of money or reputation even, but it's a challenge. And there are so many makers. I think what we need is this new currency to be established among all the individuals. But we also need an open source bank for all the tools we need, for the open knowledge, and if we could even make it a brand, an open source brand, that all like-minded people work for this brand, then we could even establish such a free society and even compete with a regular system if needed. Actually, Bert-Ola, the social capital, you introduced me to social capital. This is part of this what are speaking about.
I think I have been looking to relation all over the last 10 years, so very much from how to build a sustainable society, and so I don't come from the artist perspective, but I can see that in order to build relationship capital or good relations and trust, you need some kind of you need to do things. You need a lot of action and to build the trust in society. So it's very interesting to see, and I have followed Joy's work for several years and other projects, and to just talk and to meet, that's good and interesting, but it's even more effective to have embody meaning in a deeper way around relationships.
And I think there's the real need for that scaffolded approach where I guess I look at people as being blockers or enablers within all those systems, the power structures, and I guess it's around infiltrating and brokering those relationships that are strategic. And they can be artists in those places.
Okay, great. I think we have there some problem with the microphone. Any final comment? I think we have been around there for an hour and 10 minutes now.
Well, I do have a comment. I think we're talking about relative abstraction when what we're seeing is tremendous collapse, not just to the natural world that we all depend on around us, but to political systems. And I think we have to factor in the kinds of migrations that we're seeing, the kinds of refugees that we're seeing crossing the globe, and that's very related to climate change. All the disrupted territories are territories where they're experiencing drought and famine, and that's very triggered by these climate changes. So I think that when we talk about trust and changing the way people think, we also have to factor in that the disturbances we're seeing to global systems might be more than we can all manage and more than we can handle with trust alone, honestly. And I don't know the solution to that, but I think when we talk about resilience, when we talk about urban systems, when we talk about change, we have to think that the changes we're facing now in our lifetimes are more than any of us are going to be able to handle.
Yeah, that's we will see in a few years, or in the coming decades, I guess. I'm looking into Carol. I don't know if you know Carol Sanford or the Fullerton Institute around regenerative capital, and I guess there are some type of frameworks coming up now where you can still have a resilience method, but grow resources in a very interesting way, and still being sustainable. Any final comment? We leave that to you who are like hosting this event in Germany. What will you do next, Joy?
I will next thank you for this hangout. It was very interesting. A shame that we had these technical problems, and I think this could be a good start to talk about our subject. But our time is limited, so maybe we can all add our groups and projects in this thread, so that we can afterwards see what projects we are working on and maybe communicate further. What do you think? Is this a good idea?
Very good idea.
Yeah, because I feel very comfortable with all of you, and I think here the situation also is very tense. So we need to go on with our festival. We have a final panel right now, fishbowl discussion. However, they will wait for us as we're missing. Yes, it is. It's always a good feeling to see that there are like-minded people all over the world working on the same issues. So, and go on.
It was really interesting. I think we can add the other voices as well into this discussion ahead. That would add value into the conversation. Okay, I think we leave for today. People tend to want to go out when it's Saturday evening or morning when it's in US or at least in California, I guess. So have a nice day and a nice weekend, and hopefully we can meet up again soon.
I'm going back to bed.
Okay, see you.
Yeah, Thank you.
You're in Australia. Okay, bye. See you. Bye.